Okay guys, I have debated in several times about how I could present some of this to you as far as repairing brakes on an older camper. What I've decided to do is just kind of lay out some of these parts for you, describe what they are and how to get them, because that is one of the biggest issues that I have run into, is how to find parts for this thing. If you have an older camper, you've probably run into the same thing that I have. Ours has a Ford chassis. You'll find some parts that match the Chevy chassis, and then as you dig into it, you'll start looking at things that belong to a Ford E350 van from the 80s or 70s even. And then, going back, I even have found, certain parts that are similar to a Navistar International truck. And I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. I keep finding more and more parts. So what I thought I would do is explain to you all the parts of the hydraulic system. I'm not going to include the calipers or the disc brakes in this video. I'll do a separate video for that. Those are much easier to come across anyway. Instead, what we're going to focus on are the components and the brake lines, because those are going to be the things that just boggle your mind. They boggle the mind of every local mechanic I've spoken to. And the answers, once you figure it out, that you can repair every part of this system, every part of your old camper, whatever it is. There's ways of doing it, and I'll explain which ones of these are the hardest to find. So starting out, on the driver's side, underneath that driver's wheel well, front wheel well, we have what they call a Hydromax braking system. These are made by Bendix mainly. It's a very popular braking system in trucks. You have a Hydromax on the front, and then that is bolted on right here to a master cylinder with a remote reservoir plate, and your reservoir is usually up in the front somewhere that's accessible. Depending on the vehicle that you have, the chassis, you're going to have a different braking mount. The company I bought this Hydromax from comes with new ones, but you could also pop off the old mount and put it on your new option. And then you also have a hydraulic motor at the bottom here. And the way this works is the Hydromax is powered by your power steering fluid. Your brake cylinder, your master cylinder, is powered obviously by your brake fluid. And this electric motor down here is kind of the backup. So if it senses low pressure, it'll kick that on to help you stop your vehicle. Everything in here is essential to the operation of your vehicle if you want it to stop. But moving on, if you have 8 wheels like our camper does, or basically a third set of wheels, that is called a tag axle, and the tag axle has a separate braking system. The Hydromax will probably only operate your front 4 wheels. If you have a tag axle braking system, what you most likely have, and this one is located underneath the back, the passenger side steps midway down the vehicle. This is called an Ultravac made by Midland Brakes. This is Midland's version of a Hydrovac braking system. It uses a vacuum suction from the motor to actuate the cylinder, which then actuates the brakes. The way that this system works on the tag axle is it has a sync valve, and I've got some stuff attached to the sync valve from testing it, excuse that. But this is a sync valve, and the sync valve will basically, as pressure rises in the sync valve, it allows airflow through, which activates your Hydrovac. And that tells the vehicle it needs more stopping power, and so it implements your very rear wheels and synchronizes them with the rest of the vehicle. So all of these are extremely important components. Now, Midland brake parts that you'll find for your tag axle are non-existent. If you can find the Hydrovac, it's most likely out of stock everywhere you look, and it's just not remanufactured. There might be some places that will do it per order. I mean, the cores are out there, but nobody's rebuilding them anymore. So that is going to be an issue. I'll explain to you how you can get one of these within a couple weeks. The valve is an even trickier issue, but again, I have a solution for that. Finally, you've got all your brake lines. A lot of these are metal brake lines, and we'll get into how these are put together, as well as your brake hoses and you're going to have some hydraulic hoses that you have to replace as well. So this is everything but the calipers and the disc brakes. This is all of your hydraulic components to your camper's braking system that you're going to have to figure out how to restore and replace. So let's start off with some of the easier things to replace, the hoses. Okay, so first you're going to find that on your Hydromax you have what we call a low pressure return hose from the Hydrovac and the power steering pump into your hydraulic reservoir for your power steering fluid. And you'll also have some low pressure 1/2 inch piping on your Hydrovac. These are probably your easiest to replace. You can go to any hardware store really and get some low pressure return lines, and they're not too expensive. I mean, you'll pay a little bit of money per foot. I got basically about 8 feet of line here to handle both tasks that these lines once handled. These are just cut off. They're, you know, they're pretty old and ruggedy. Now, I went to a place that specializes in brake lines to make sure that I was getting the right material for these. Now, your old brake line and hydraulic hoses are going to be near impossible to match up going to a parts store, and that's because they're not going to know exactly which line you need and which fittings, the lengths. All of these have different ends to them. Our front brakes, for example, you know, they go through the frame and bolt on the other side of the frame, whereas in the back, they've got the clips. So this could be very confusing for somebody who has never dealt with anything like this before, and then trying to find these hoses by looking through parts catalogs. You'll spend hours doing it. Now you're gonna, no matter what, you're gonna spend about, I think just a hose this length, a Bendix hose would cost you about $35. And you need 2 of those for the front, you need about 2 for the back, and then we've got multiple hoses that connect to anywhere where you need a flexible brake line between the tag axle, etc. So you're gonna have a lot of hoses. I counted 7 hoses myself. So what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna look for a DOT approved hose repair store in your area. And what they'll do is they will take these hoses and they will rebuild them as an exact match to your original hoses. So this this one went to the Hydrovac. This one here, I believe, goes on the tag axle brakes itself. And then we've got multiple hoses. We've got 2 longer hoses and then 2 slightly shorter hoses. The shorter hoses, I believe, go to the rear wheels, and the longer hoses go to the front wheels. But as you can see, everything is an exact match. I don't have to do any funky refitting, and I got all of these hoses rebuilt for about $287. That's 7 hoses. That I did have included in that a new hydraulic hose to go onto our Hydro Max up front. So this one probably added to that as well. But I mean, this is just a great way of getting exact matching hoses, being this one here. But I have the exact same fittings, so putting this back is going to be a lot easier than trying to match up something from a parts catalog that's not an exact fit. So that's how you do your hoses. Okay, so let's talk about brake lines real quick. These are your standard brake lines that will run out throughout the bottom of the vehicle. The hoses are what connect to areas that move. The brake lines are what hold the pressure and connect to all the other areas underneath your RV or truck or whatever it is that you're trying to restore. So what happens with these is these are made of steel. And as you can see, there's some corrosion inside there. There's some gunk, some rust buildup. Any moisture that eventually gets in the system, which with an 88 camper, eventually moisture gets into the system, unfortunately. It'll start to rust and corrode on the inside of these, and that gets into your brake fluid, which is why your brake fluid is often a really dark color, and it should be a very light, almost clear yellow color when it goes in. all of that gunk is going to get into all of your expensive hydraulic parts that you install into the system. And so you need to keep that out and you need to keep it clean. So I would suggest, along with the hoses actually will deteriorate from the inside and they won't let fluid pass through them. We had that problem on one of our wheels where the wheel was locking up and it wouldn't release the brake. That's because the fluid wasn't passing through the hoses. And you'll have similar problems with these old brake lines as well. So everything should be replaced if you're going to spend a lot of money on your system. These aren't expensive. These are easy to do. What I've been using, and these are 1/4-inch lines. What I've been using is for lifetime lines, a nickel copper coil. This is seamless nickel copper tubing, and this is a 3/16. You'll find that in a lot of these older campers, you're gonna have a 1/4-inch line throughout most of the camper, but then your tag axle, which is a separate area, is going to have a much smaller line. This is the 3/16 line. The way that this line works is it's actually extremely flexible. You can easily bend it, straighten it, move it. I use a bender, and I'll show you how I put these together in a separate video because I feel like there's a lot to it. It's very easy. You can get all this stuff you need from Harbor Freight and do it very inexpensively. But I'll do a separate video on actually how to flare your tubing and bend it, etc. But talking about the materials of the line, I really like this stuff. It's corrosion resistant. They have a great warranty on their products. It's a lot cheaper ordering this from For Lifetime Lines and going to AutoZone. A 1/4-inch coil of this stuff, 25-foot roll at your local auto parts store is going to cost you anywhere between 50 to 80 bucks. You can get a 25-foot coil of this stuff from For Lifetime Lines for about $36, which is what you're going to pay for the steel tubing. Steel tubing today comes with a PVC coating to protect it, and I had originally gone that route because I wasn't sure if the copper nickel was going to hold up to the same strength as far as expansion with pressure, but from what I've read, it's actually the product of choice these days and it holds up just fine. The problem with the PVC coated is that you'll notice on these lines some sort of rusty old little spring on there. And what that is it's gravel guard. Gravel guard protects your lines from any road debris, gravel kicking up and hitting your braking lines. Because as you know, if your brake lines get punctured, what will happen is your car won't stop, your RV won't stop, your house on the road is just gonna keep rolling. So you need to protect those lines. I've been using a stainless steel gravel guard protector. This is the 1/4-inch. You can get it for all different sizes of line. When I do my transmission lines, I'm also upgrading to the same material, and I'm putting on the 5/16-inch gravel guard on those lines because they actually do have holes in them, probably from road debris kicking up and hitting the old rusty lines. So these are super easy to bend, and I use a bending tool and just I've kind of been remanufacturing all my lines, the smaller lines and some of the longer lines, pre-installation so that they're just ready to go. And you know, you can get these fittings at your local auto parts store. You can get them online, and I'll show you how we do the flaring tool and everything. It's really a very easy process. You'll save a lot of money doing this yourself, and you'll never find these parts independently online. I mean, that's a joke. Okay, so a Hydromax system consists of a master cylinder. You're gonna have a remote reservoir plate if you have an RV like ours. You also have your Hydromax, a motor down here, which is a backup motor in case pressure fails. That comes in to kick up pressure in your power steering, the Hydromax itself. And then you've got a linkage. This is really what varies between vehicle and vehicle, is this linkage up here. Is the this is the Ford version, but it's different for Chevy. It's different for a lot of different vehicles. But the Hydromax itself is a pretty common Bendix part. The main thing you're going to want to do is, number one, identify the right size master cylinder, because and we'll get into the Hydromax in a second, but a lot of those are pretty similar. So the cylinder on this one is a 2-inch bore, and you can find that, you can't read it through there, but there's raised lettering on the side. It's a 2-inch bore master cylinder. You'll find a lot of places that just reference the 2-inch bore or the 50 millimeter. That is basically how they're sizing up your master cylinder. It'll perform the same. What I did for ours, and you can see here that ours is nearly, well, for the master cylinder and the Hydromax, it is exactly the same. But what I did was I went off of the casting number back here. On the other side of this, you'll find a casting number. It's right where my hand is, that's indented. And the casting number will give you the exact casting of this product, and then you can find them remanufactured all over the internet. The Hydromax is going to be a little bit different. What I did on the Hydromax is I went off of the casting number. Again, that'll be on the side. There's a little circle with a number in it, and that's the number I used to find the right Hydromax for the system. The next thing you have to look at is that you've got a single plug up here. This is a Ford version. They do have some that have a dual plug. That plug can vary between Hydromaxes, so pay attention to which plug you're getting, because that's going to be critically important. So you can see that on our new Hydromax, I have the same exact plug there. Now, this one came with a new Ford linkage. The linkage is up here, and so I will install that linkage. If you can't find the exact linkage for your vehicle, or the linkage is different in shape and size, or just isn't the same, you can pull this and install it onto there. The company that I bought my Hydromax, the motor, and the master cylinder from is in Texas. It's a really great company. They shipped it out in a super quick time. They will give you credit for your core if you can ship it to them. They're pretty heavy, and so you can save a little bit of money there, but they did a fantastic job. Now, I have found since then some motors that are smaller in size. I don't know if they're readily available. I'm hoping that this motor fits into where I need it to fit just fine without causing any issues. But if not, I could go back to this older motor. That older motor still worked, or I'll try and find that particular motor. But I'm hoping that I could just install this the way it is. For the remote reservoir plate, I had to go through a company in California. It was a really sketchy situation to me. When I called and texted after I didn't receive the part after a week, the guy said I'm no longer selling parts, or I'm not in sales, or something like that. I was finally, in a non-polite way, able to get them to fulfill the order that I paid for, and they sent this to me. So I'll put their link down below in case you can't find it from somebody else, but I would encourage you to try and find it from somewhere else. Now, the same company in Texas that makes these, this was about $116 just for the plate, okay? Same company that makes these makes the 2-inch bore version with a plate already on it. That's something to consider. It's a little more expensive than the way I did it. I don't know why, but they're a much better company to work with, in my opinion. You could also try and reuse your old plate. I don't want to reuse much on this. Now, depending on what type of hydrovac you have for your tag axle, this is where you could start to run into some problems. I know I certainly did. These hydrovacs, this particular hydrovac system, you've got a reservoir here. It's almost a separate braking system from the rest of the truck, and all you have is a valve that tells this system when to kick on and when to kick off. It's called a tag sync valve. These tag sync valves are nearly impossible to find. It basically has some sort of hair filter underneath here with a check valve, an airflow check valve. I'm not sure how that works exactly, but if this part doesn't work, you might be able to get a different check valve for it, just a little plastic one that you put in line. And then this valve up top You can see I have this attached to it. I was testing the valve. I put about 20 pounds of pressure in there, and it cuts off airflow from this tube that goes up and connects with the, there's a T where a tube comes out to the valve and a tube comes out to the hydrovac. I'm guessing that when this airflow gets shut off, what's going to happen is that the vacuum pressure will kick in on the hydrovac and cause it to expand and fill the cylinder with fuel, because it would, if this one cuts off, it would put all the suction from the engine on here, and then that would cause your diaphragm to push this way, pushing your fluid into your brakes. So these systems are hard to find. Everywhere I looked, this is the Midland C479 hydrovac, and you might be able to find this through Haldex. They might be able to do a made-to-order refurbishment for you. Haldex now owns all the Midland parts, so that's one resource you could check into. Now this one I'm shipping off to California to Power Brake Services, and they will do a remanufacturing of this part. They're going to remanufacture it completely, and I think that's probably the best way to go. It's about $328, $350 to have them do that, and it will be better than new when it's done. The remanufacturing is of great quality. They specialize in remanufacturing brake parts from all over the world, and it takes about, from the time they get it for a hydrovac, they said it would take about a week. Now the valve, I would like to have the valve remanufactured, because at that point, that's the only thing that I haven't replaced on this thing. But for the valve, you're talking about $528 for remanufacturing of the valve. And that would be, I think that would be ideal if I could have it remanufactured as well. But they can also do this valve. So for those of you, I've seen this on forums, people are freaking out. They've been changing out their tag axle brakes for a new system because they can't find these parts. These parts can be remanufactured. The company I found that can do it is Power Brake Services in California. You ship it to them, 5 to 7 days for the hydrovac, 8 to 10 days for the valve on remanufacturing. So give yourself about 2 weeks with shipping to get it out to them and get it back. But that is probably the best way that you can go about replacing these. And this system has been a mystery to so many people. I feel like that's pertinent information. Nobody else seems to know how to get this part of the system repaired. I've actually heard of people cutting off this system from the braking because they still have 4 operating brakes up front. I think that's a really bad idea because you're driving a house down the road. I wouldn't do that. I would have this rebuilt, remanufactured, and put back in. And then again, this feeds out into the 3/16 and line into the back disc drum brakes of that extra axle on your RV. So it pretty much is just a small master cylinder on the hydrovac. I don't know why it is such a, I guess Midland, it's just not around anymore. I hope if you guys are working on an old RV, this video is helpful to you. Finding parts for RVs can be extremely tricky. Stay tuned for videos on how to build your brake lines. I'll do that as I reinstall them here shortly. And I'll also do a video on identifying your brake calipers, how to order those, where to order those. Those are a little bit easier from my experience to find replacement parts for. And I may be jinxing myself. The back tag axle could be very tricky, but I know that the front 4 are all Bendix brakes, and Bendix has been relatively easy to find replacement parts for. I mean, even with some of the older stuff, there's always something that's been upgraded or kept in manufacturing by Bendix. So that is, if you're looking at something, make sure it's got Bendix brakes and check that tag axle. Again, this project is for a nonprofit that we have that travels the country filming small farms and ranches to promote agriculture, regenerative agriculture. If you found this video helpful, please feel free to make a donation to that nonprofit for putting these videos out there, because your donation is helping us. And I can tell you from the amount of extensive research that I've had to do to find these parts and understand how to find parts or how to have them made and remanufactured, it's hours of time. So it's worth at least a small donation there.